Years of Trump. Well, the year 2004 was a big turning point in Donald Trump's career as celebrity businessman with the debut of his reality show, The Apprentice. I spoke with him on the day this show premiered. When you fire these people, it's not the same as firing somebody, or is it, in real life?
It's not much different, Chris, to be honest. You know, over the years, I fired, unfortunately, a lot of people. And you can do it nice, you can do it easy, you can take your time. I've taken months and months to fire people. And in the end, or you can do it viciously and quickly and you're fired. In the end, it doesn't matter. When you fire somebody, they hate you.
When Trump came back in September to promote the second season of the then-hit show, I asked him about the upcoming presidential campaign, his thoughts on George Bush versus John Kerry, campaign politics, and the war in Iraq. Let's watch. Economically, what is the impact of a government that decides to borrow a war, basically, to pay for it later?
Well,
Fly now, fight now, pay later.
Look, I don't think it's positive. I think it's been a big negative. There are other places. If you look at North Korea, if you look at, frankly, I mean, I think if the United States used that as a launching base to go into Iran and clean out some of their nuclear problems, maybe all of a sudden I'd start to say that was a great move. Because we ought to look at Iran and we ought to look at North Korea and what they're doing with nuclear weapons.
Let me ask you about this this choice people make. What kind of a choice is it? I mean, historically, a re-election campaign has been distinctive from a regular presidential campaign because you basically have a track record of a guy for 4 years. Is this really what it's about? If the guy's done a good job, keep him if he hasn't, dump him, or is it a choice question like we always face in other races?
Well, I think in this case it's both. I mean, some people love Bush. It's very fragmented, but it really is both. People love him and the job he's done, and other people just can't stand him and the job he's done. And people are very mixed on Kerry. And I will tell you this. I sat through the convention in New York, and they did a great job, the Republicans. But maybe the greatest spin I've ever seen on anything is it's almost coming out that Bush is a war hero and Kerry's not. I think that could be the greatest spin I've ever seen.
Because?
Well, you know, the whole thing with the Swift Boat Group, which obviously is being done by Bush and Bush's people, happened to be brilliant. They've taken all of that war hero thing away from Kerry, and they've almost given it to Bush. And Bush, frankly, was not serving. That we know.
Let me ask you about perhaps what you might call unnecessary roughness in politics. This week, Dick Cheney, the vice president, a very tough guy, said that if we elect, the American people elect Kerry, that we're basically going to face ourselves with the threat of a devastating attack. He's saying, vote Democrat, you're going to get attacked.
Well, it's a terrible statement unless he gets away with it. But, you know, the other side doesn't seem to be hitting very hard. The Republicans are hitting much harder than the Democrats. It's a terrible statement unless, you know, let's see how the other side handles it. But already after 2 days, I haven't seen much handling.
It's a terrible attack because you're saying because it means that you believe the other side, just by its election, would endanger the country.
Well, I mean, just take a look at that whole premise. 9/11 happened during the Bush administration. Why doesn't somebody attack it? I'm not taking sides. I'm just saying it's amazing. He made that statement 2 or 3 days ago, and I haven't heard anything to knock him. It's really amazing when you think of it.
If you were the corner man, I know the Contender's coming, the program you're going to be producing. If you were a corner man for Kerry right now, what would you tell him to do? Quit? Change? Get tough? Be visceral, be spontaneous, be something you're not. How can you change this guy to a winner?
Look, I know him, and he's a very capable guy. And frankly, every election he's losing until the end. That's the one thing you have to remember about him. He was losing the primary, and he ended up winning easily. And, you know, if you go back 4 weeks before the primary, he was out of it. I mean, people weren't even talking about him, and he ended up winning. He was also losing for the Senate to Governor Weld, and it was not even going to be a contest. He had 30% of the vote to 70%, and he ended up killing him. So, you know, the guy has a way of coming back. So don't just think that he's going to go away. He's a very capable guy. But the Republicans so far have just been decimating the Democrats. And I think Kerry has to go out and do his thing, and he's fine at it. He's won lots of elections. But it's very interesting. He has come from behind on many elections.
Why is he putting out, even now, a confusing position on Iraq?
Well, I think the whole campaign so far as I'm concerned, has been confusing. He ought to say something, and frankly, I think what people really want to hear is we're going to get out of there as quickly as possible. I think that's what people want to hear.
You mean you don't think they care whether he's for the war or not? Because that seems unclear as hell right now.
Well, you know, so many things can happen. I was asking somebody today, why can't they find a 6'6" Arab named Osama bin Laden. He's 6'6". He's on a dialysis machine, supposedly, and we can't find him. And then you see him on television all the time. They can't track him. If I'm on television, they track me. If you're on television, they track. We can't track this guy. Now, if Bush found him prior to the election is won. Then I would tell Kerry you'd might as well give it up because the election's won. So a lot of things can happen that can inure both positive and negative to both parties.
After the 2004 election, I asked Trump for his take on the economy, domestic and international, and got a look at how he'd handle one government program if he were president. Let's talk about the economy. I want to ask you, I only got a couple minutes left here, Donald. I want to ask you about the three big concerns I have as one of the many Americans worried about the economy. The dollar, are you worried about them letting it go tip too low in the world market?
Well, the dollar is keeping the economy good in a sense because people are coming to New York as an example. They're buying apartments in New York. They're using the hotels. The dollar, it's a horrible word when they say the low dollar, the cheap dollar. It's a terrible word to use. But the fact is it happens to bring a lot of business into this country.
But it's great to travel in this country. It's a terrible situation to travel overseas with, right?
Well, that's right, but it keeps people here, so I'm not sure that's so bad.
You're not worried that there'll come a time when the people who are lending us money from the Far East, China and Japan, will simply say, I don't like the value of the dollar anymore, I'm getting out, and then we're in a big trouble with a bank run, basically, on U.S. paper?
I don't see it happening. This is one country that it's just not going to happen to. Having the dollar where it's a reduced value a little bit, it sounds terrible and you hate to say it, but the fact is it brings business and it's actually good in terms of what we all do.
So you expect they'll keep this policy?
I think they're going to keep the policy. I think the dollar's probably going to inch up a little bit, and that's not so bad. But, you know, the worst times we've had is when you had a very strong dollar. Nothing came in at all.
Well, and
having a strong dollar, it turned out to be, it sounds good. That one sounds great, but nothing happens good for the country.
Well, what about when you compound the situation by a big long-term borrowing situation? In addition to the couple billion, we're borrowing about $600 billion a year now. What happens when you add to that the big money we're going to have to borrow to carry Social Security into this new form of individual accounts? That means big short-term deficits for the federal budget. Does that take us over to the tipping point with regard to the value of the dollar, all that borrowing?
Well, we've had the deficits before, and, you know, we're going to have them again, and we're going to have them for a while. And the war is certainly costing a tremendous amount of money, far more than anyone ever thought. The key is as long as interest rates stay low, Chris. If interest rates are low, we're going to be fine. If interest rates go up and the dollar goes up, that is a really devastating combination.
Well, how do you avoid rising interest rates if you double the borrowing with the new Social Security plan?
Well, it is really amazing because I've been asking that for the last year or so, and the fact is that rates are still very low. They continue to be low, and I'm very happy about it because I can tell you the real estate industry, so many different industries, if rates go up, they're going to collapse, and it's not going to be good. So if we can keep the dollar pretty much where it is, even a little bit higher is fine, and interest rates keep low, we're going to be in good shape.
You're not afraid this isn't just another bubble situation where it doesn't go wrong till it does go wrong, and then it's really bad?
Well, Chris, don't forget, at some point, it always goes wrong. You know, no matter where, no matter when, it always goes wrong. I mean, we've been riding something very good and very strong for a long period of time. At some point, things will happen, and they won't be pleasant. And you know what? We'll get out of them, and it'll be all right.
If you were president of the United States, would you push individual retirement accounts for Social Security?
I sort of think I would. Something has to be done. Social Security is a huge problem right now, funding it, and something's going to have to be done, and it's going to have to be done very quickly, actually. I think, you know, they're moving on different methods, but something is going to have to be done rather quickly.
In 2005, Donald Trump was back, this time to promote his plan for the World Trade Center site to rebuild the Twin Towers. He had some harsh words for the planned Freedom Tower, now called One World Trade Center. What role? Will you lead a coalition to stop Governor Pataki from his strong support for the Freedom Tower?
Well, there's not much of a role I can take. It all started when the New York Post called me and asked my opinion. And I'm the biggest developer in New York by far. I've done just about, I guess, everything you can do in the world of real estate. And I see what's happening down there. It's a mess. And it's a shame. It's really a shame. We have a great opportunity. And, you know, the terrorists win. If we build this job the way it is, the terrorists win. If we rebuild the World Trade Center, but a story taller and stronger, then we win. I mean, I don't want to have the terrorists win, Chris, and that's what's going to happen if we build this pile of junk.